As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a first-time guest this evening. Brad Eckenweiler is the CEO and Director of Lifestyle Delivery Systems. That's ticker symbol LDS. It's a publicly traded company. He's here with us to talk to us about the mission of his company, and we're going to examine some of the aspects of how it involves preparedness and self-reliance for people's individual health. Brad, thank you so much for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Dunnigan, thank you for having me.
Could you give us a quick intro, a minute or two of what the mission is of your company, what sets it apart?
Absolutely. One of the things that we had started with was a technology that we were fairly certain was unique, not just to the marijuana market, but in fact would be unique to any application of either over-the-counter or pharmaceutical products. That product is Cannastrips. It is a sublingual strip, and unlike most of the strips, or at least all the strips that we've seen in the marketplace, this particular formula breaks through the saliva mucal membrane barrier and delivers a significant portion of the medicine almost in the first 2 to 3 minutes. So most of the strips that are out there, you will get some sublingual delivery, but the majority of it will still be in your saliva, being swallowed at a very slow rate, but still you'll end up with it in your gastrointestinal tract, and ultimately your liver is going to filter out probably 50% of whatever the benefit is that you are taking sublingually. So initially we had this concept, we developed it, we came to the conclusion that manufacturing was going to be one of the obstacles. We found a number of aspects that we thought were probably beneficial on the manufacturing side, and then we were capable of producing equipment that was able to do in a 10-hour period 500,000 strips at a very economical rate. So that solved that problem, and we initially thought that was our only issue. So our mission initially was to build a superior delivery system and be able to offer it at a price that was reasonable and significantly lower than any other product that was in the market. We are able to do that. Our mission had to change, though, because there was little or no infrastructure in this marketplace. And that being said, the genetics for everything that we were doing was all over the map, so every plant was different. The components in the genetics of plants were all different, which meant that extractions had to probably encompass more than one plant to get the same amount of material that if we'd had the right plant, we could have gotten out of one plant. Beyond that, the quality of material being grown, the purity, without pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, became almost impossible to find. So our mission then became, how do we in fact control our supply chain? So our mission got deeper and deeper. The fact that we couldn't just find growers who were doing it properly in our mind, or at least to the standards that we wanted, again, because this is going directly into your bloodstream. So we're hypersensitive to the purity of the material that we get. Beyond that, we realized that it was going to make a lot more sense if we could, in fact, be able to structure our own genetics, thereby putting all the genetics we wanted into a product into one plant, so that we could reduce the number of extractions, the extraction time, and the complication of trying to source material that had the genetics that we specifically wanted. I know this is a bit of a long answer to your question, but the fact is now that we found that our mission statement is to control our material, our growth, our genetics, our manufacturing, and our distribution internally. Since there is no infrastructure in this industry in California that we can depend on, we've taken it upon ourselves to take the challenge of doing every aspect, every step from the genetics, from the seed, all the way to our patients. So we can, with confidence, tell them exactly what's in this product. And they know that they'll get the exact same benefit and response from the product each and every time. So that's our mission statement now. It certainly has changed over the last 2 years, but I think to the benefit of our patients for sure.
And if we could zoom up to a high level of the big why, the big driving impact of what change do you see your company going to make in the world in terms of people's health? That seems to be, if we could start with that, so that our viewers can understand, Lifestyle Delivery Systems is providing, you mentioned this high integrity, high quality, and affordable cost method of delivering cannabis derivatives to impact people's health. Is that what you're?
Correct. Yes. And obviously, we don't pretend or assume that cannabis products or cannabis derivatives are a cure-all or an answer to every ailment that someone might have. But we have found it to be certainly a benefit to many patients, many ailments, sometimes in concert with other things like people that are going through chemo, as opposed to having to deal with the pain in some other method by opiate or something else that reduces your immune system. This actually boosts your immune system. So, we don't think that we're going to replace pharmaceutical companies or anything else, but we do think this is it. We think it's a benefit, and it's a benefit to a significant number of patients, certainly in the epileptic world, certainly in the cancer world, PSTD and other ailments. It's been a benefit. And I think, most patients, most human beings have the challenge of making decisions in their life when it comes to their health. The nice thing about this is that there are relatively no side effects. If it works for you, great. And if it doesn't leave you with side effects that maybe were worse than what you were trying to cure. So,
right. So this was an eye-opener for me, because we have interviewed a lot of different people on this channel who have come out with different recommended ways for empowering individuals to take more responsibility for self-reliance and their own health. I must admit that I had to go through a bit of self-examination as I was approaching our interview, thinking about reservations that I might have about discussing substances which have been controlled substances in the past, and the laws are changing about that. But for people who have reservations about potentially addictive drugs or what could be gateways to more serious drugs, what do you think they need to understand about cannabis?
Well, and I think that has always been the fear. Certainly, I'm in my 60s. In my lifetime, that was always the fear. I did just recently, about 8 months ago, go to a symposium of doctors at University of California, Irvine, that put on a lecture that was the end of opiates. And I was amazed, and I learned significant number of facts about the benefits on the THC side of marijuana and cannabis with regards to taking people off of Oxycontin, taking people off of morphine, and the fact that it might be more of a gateway off of hard drugs than a gateway to hard drugs. So there's certainly a benefit if used properly. I think, like anything, it certainly can be abused. I don't think there are too many things in our world that we can't abuse. But for the most part, what we've seen, one of the kind of startling insurance companies had come out with an analysis of how much money had been spent in the United States for overdoses in 2015 in hospitals nationwide. And I was shocked to find out it was $79 billion was spent on overdoses of basically pharmaceutical drugs. And of these overdoses, not $1 was spent on an overdose of marijuana. And I thought that was a bit startling in the fact that I assumed that at some point, somebody might be able to figure out a way to overdose themselves on marijuana. But I think part of that is the fact that it doesn't interfere, with a number of things like heart rate and what have you, or, the ability for the heart to receive messages and what have you. So
that is, I wanted to zoom in on that issue about seriousness of side effects and that sort of thing, because you can't, anybody who has turned on any media in the last decade can't have avoided seeing multiple pharmaceutical advertisements, and in all of those advertisements we have this supposed benefit that's going to be coming from taking this drug, and the characteristics of the beneficial class that would benefit from it seems like it keeps getting narrower and narrower and narrower. If you're at this age and you've had this many procedures and you've had this and you're not eligible for that and you have that type of this, it narrows down to this very restrictive case. And then it says, then talk to your doctor about this, and from then on all you see is the beautiful slow motion pictures of people walking and being happy. But if the words are saying it's just a litany of serious side effects, up to and including death, that they're talking about, and in the face of that, a lot of people that I've talked with see pharmaceutical companies as largely being focused on profits, despite any of those serious risks and side effects to the individual, and at the expense of and not even neglecting to really address the natural wellness and well-being of the patients. And so could you weigh in on what you think are the driving factors behind popular views of the pharmaceutical industry as I've described, and how your company's approach differs?
Okay, that's a deep question. I would have to say, though, that pharmaceutical companies are not altruistic. They're not structured that way. The cost of taking a drug from its inception through FDA trials to get it to market is so expensive that I cannot imagine that there's a pharmaceutical company out there that isn't looking at how to make the most amount of money from whatever drugs that they've gotten approved. I think everyone has to kind of keep that in mind. And certainly our doctors should keep that in mind, because unfortunately it comes down to who's prescribing these things, not just who's making them, but at the end of the day, who's telling us to take them. I do agree that when you hear these side effects, it's daunting to try and weigh whatever it is you're trying to solve at the risk of any one of a number of other side effects. For our purpose, we were looking primarily for a way to deliver cannabinoids to patients, to individuals, regardless of their age, without smoking it, without ingesting it through an edible, but to get the benefit to them so that they could hopefully be able to alleviate whatever the symptoms of whatever it is that is obviously they're trying to address with this product. But I will also say that my overriding direction was from day one is I didn't want this product to be expensive. I didn't want there to have to be a choice. If you wanted to try this product, there'd be nothing between you and this product. It's certainly not price. If you got a recommendation from your doctor to try this product would never cost you more than $2. And we hope to bring that down further. So is that a different approach? To a certain degree, I think it is. But at the same time, we're approaching this as a manufacturer. we're in the middle of finishing a facility that's pharmaceutical grade, certainly better than food grade production facility. And, our whole intent is to be able to give the highest quality product to everyone, and that price would never be the differentiating factor. My daughter is severely allergic to peanuts. And I don't know, you've probably seen this in the news, but EpiPens used to be $75 here in the U.S. They're now $750, and they expire every 6 months. Granted, I can afford to pay $750, and I know I'm getting basically taken to the cleaners. But I always worry about the kids whose parents, $750 might be their entire food budget for a month. Can they really afford to pay $750 for an EpiPen that's probably necessary to save their child's life?
The dynamic you mentioned there of sort of radical affordability, and not only out of nowhere, but out of using a natural source, echoes a lot of what some of our guests have talked about in other areas, where we've become culturally so disconnected from the natural origins and the natural sources and the natural roots of things, and the skills that used to be traditionally known and handed down from generation to generation, that now in a sense we've become a helpless generation and able to become just the market of a consumer society, where then they can basically sell back to you packaged nature or the results of things they've created outside of nature, and you have very little feeling of choice or awareness of that this could be provided at a much lower cost by getting closer to its natural sources. And it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is getting back to organic and or at least pesticide-free, herbicide-free cultivation and that sort of thing, and then distillation of the essential elements from that can directly impact people's health. Can you talk to us for a few moments about your company's current projects and what direction that's taking you in the future?
Well, we believe we've solved at least our first phase of the ability to manufacture this product and manufacture it in a cost-effective way and make it available to patients in a very affordable manner. What we're doing at this point is we just acquired some property, 10 acres in Adelanto. We're actually looking at acquiring more property. It will be our intent to build the type of grow facilities, cultivation facilities, that we know are going to be necessary to grow material in an environment that would be suitable for us, and then rent those facilities to growers who have licenses, but they will have to grow basically our genetics under our guidelines, under our supervision, to make sure that we can buy this product back. So we've kind of taken, since we're not allowed yet in California to grow the size or to build the size of facility for ourselves, this is kind of a roundabout way of getting it done. It's not a bad way. We would probably prefer to be able to grow 1 million square feet at a time ourselves. But this, in the same token, has maybe an upside benefit in that we'll be training maybe 20 licensees how to grow in a manner that they don't need pesticides. They're not going to need herbicides. This will be chemical-free product, organically grown. So maybe even though it isn't our ultimate desire, we may get a benefit that we hadn't originally anticipated. So we're also in the completion, or probably a month and a half away from completing our genetics nursery. Once that's done, we'll be able to supply over 1 million square feet to growers of seedlings that are genetically pure and that carry all those genetic traits that we're looking for, again, for us to be able to buy back from the growers and use for our extraction, distillation, and ultimately for our products. Another thing I hadn't mentioned is a lot of growers are using cloning methods. And the problem we've seen with cloning is, one, the plants become weaker and weaker as cloning continues, which causes them to have to use pesticides. But even more importantly, plants that haven't had pesticides on them, when you clone a plant with another plant that had pesticides already in its genetics or chemical contamination, to a lesser degree, it's in this new plant as well. So you've taken, basically tainted plant material and grafted it to another plant. This is what we're seeing everywhere, which is really unfortunate for us. We were hoping that we'd find more and more growers out there that could actually deliver material to us. But we're finding out even those who are trying to grow correctly may have bought clones from someone who had tainted material that had been grafted to their material. So it's pretty pervasive. But again, it's just another obstacle for us that we had to kind of overcome to be able to control our supply chain. So our genetics, which we're working on, sometime late August, our genetics laboratory will be up and running. It'll probably be another 4 months before these new greenhouses are ready to be rented. And then we're looking for additional property. So everything for us right now is about the supply chain. We can do everything else. We're not concerned. We've already developed the product, and we know we can do the manufacturing. We're down to just the specifics of the genetics and the purity of the plant itself. So that's our goal.
You've mentioned several obstacles that you've had to overcome. Are there any additional obstacles you haven't mentioned that you were faced with since this is such a new sector? You've talked about a lot of immaturity and unreadiness and uneven, in product supplier integrity, quality of and consistency of product, and the facilities and the processing. Can you just give us an understanding of what are some of these challenges that you've had to overcome?
Well, and there are additional challenges in the fact that obviously it's a new sector that's in the formation of regulation. It has regulations that exist today, but we have gone way beyond today's regulations in our buildings, in the structure of our company, in the structure of all of our contracts, because we are anticipating a litany of changes, some of which may come into effect and some which may not. But we're prepared for all the changes that have been proposed by the state. And when the state takes over control of the marijuana industry in 2018, all the way from the building to the water treatment, everything, for us, we've gone and retrofitted every aspect of our facility, of our contracts, of our hiring, of everything that we're doing to fit these new proposed regulations. And so that certainly is an obstacle. And I would say that we're over-prepared because I don't know that every one of these proposed regulatory changes will be in effect, but it won't matter which ones are because we'll be prepared for all of them. So that certainly was an obstacle to understand. And it was an obstacle to share with, we just did a large financing with Canaccord Gentry, and it took us 3 months basically for their attorneys to understand all of the nuances in California and in the county we're in and in the municipality where we are, and how our contracts and the structure of our company and all of our sub-companies are structured and how they all interrelate and are regulatory compliant for the future. So there was a lot to take in and understand and quantify. So those were all hurdles, certainly.
Looking forward, where do you see the cannabis space in, say, 5 to 10 years out?
Well, we know 5 years from now there's going to be, according to the state of California, a dramatic change. They've said that they want to look at this 5 years coming till 2023 as a honeymoon period. They're going to assess the companies that are in the space that are operating under the California law. And in 2023, they have said they've targeted that year for the year that they will then decide which companies they will allow to expand to greater size, to control their own grows, to do much larger grows, cultivations, manufacturing, and what have you. So we have a bit of a interview period of 5 years with the state to prove that we're at least as good as they would hope, and hopefully better than they anticipate. So that's looking forward. That 5-year mark will be important for lifestyle delivery systems. We intend to be hopefully the one that's setting the bar as high as possible, and the one that the state will look to ultimately to make those decisions, hopefully in our favor.
Returning back to our target audience here on Reluctant Preppers, a lot of people who are very concerned about not being helplessly dependent on the system or large institutions, and frankly, looking at if there was some disruption where supplies got interrupted, being able to be more self-reliant and be able to make sure that they can take care of their family's well-being more on their own. Is there any way that your product enables individuals to prepare to handle health challenges with a greater level of independence?
Well, certainly their decision with their doctor at this point is not something that, at least in California, is something that they can, in fact, take control of themselves. They still need a doctor's recommendation, but in very few cases have I seen that withheld or heard of that being withheld for any medical reason. But again, cannabinoids do some amazing things, but I don't think that on their own or by themselves, they're going to answer every problem for every ailment. But certainly when it comes to pain, when it comes to, things like cancer relief of pain and what have you, it does an amazing job. But again, it depends on, what ailments we're talking about.
I'm thinking back to growing up in the 60s and hearing on the news and other sources concern about, heroin epidemic and other opioids being, a real concern back then. Ironically, move forward, 50 years, here we are in the, 2017, and we're still hearing ever more so on the news about the social destruction of heroin addiction and so on. Thinking of some of our large cities where it's just a rampant and destructive force, and related to everything from how the impact on individuals' lives, their ability to work, about gangs and all that sort of thing. So for people who paint with a broad brush and think, anything that's potentially intoxicating can lead to that, what's the distinction? Where do you see the help coming for people from cannabinoids that's different from what they may have been seeing from the social impacts, the destructive social impacts of opioids?
Well, it's a difficult question on so many levels, but one level I think is a very unfortunate level of individuals who end up addicted to opioids and things like Oxycontin and what have you. That's not intentional. a lot of these patients were looking to alleviate pain, some kind of severe pain. A lot of people for, depression and what have you with Prozac and other things, they become dependent on these drugs. And I think these drugs are so much powerful than they were 50 years ago. I mean, the pharmaceutical drugs that are out there are probably more powerful than opium. I mean, the rate of Oxycontin abuse is astronomical. I mean, it's off the chart. And I don't think all of these addicts now were willing participants. I think that's a scarier thought than the person that maybe went out there, wanted to party, became a heroin addict. That's a different mentality than the person that was working, got injured, started taking, say, Oxycontin, and then Oxycontin becomes all they can think about. Again, the symposium that was University of California, Irvine put on really spoke significantly to those individuals who were addicted to Oxycontin and other pain relief, and taking them off and helping them reduce that desire and reduce their pain and still be functional. And one of the primary alternatives was, cannabis products. So again, I don't think cannabis in and of itself is the problem for those drugs and for those issues, because most of the people that are addicted to Oxycontin, quite frankly, according to the statistics, were not using marijuana. They were just taking Oxycontin because it had been prescribed by their doctor. So I understand the concern, and but again, I think marijuana needs to be treated as a proper medication. I don't like the gray area it's in right now. I'll be more excited when the state, has a hand in how it's delivered, how in fact it's cultivated, what people are actually getting, because regardless of the best of intentions of growers and what have you, those patients aren't getting the same thing every time they go to a dispensary and buy flower and smoke it. So I think to that end, being able to identify exactly what it is you're taking and understand, what your expectations are, and understanding, your own symptoms, that's the most important thing. But do I believe this product would be a gateway drug in the way it's being delivered and what have you? I doubt it very much. I don't think it meets the standards of pure excitement and over-the-top kind of party expectations. So, but it definitely does reduce pain, and we've seen that. We have a number of people who, have tried the samples and, had great results. So the one thing I think that's holding us back more than anything else is the federal government. If they would reduce the classification from a Schedule I drug, which does not allow anyone to do pharmaceutical or FDA studies, that would be huge. It would be amazing if we could, in fact, legitimately do federal trials on this material and give people even a deeper understanding than just the anecdotal understanding of other patients. Certainly there's value in the anecdotal, but I think there'd be more value to patients, and a lot more could be learned if the FDA could step aside, drop this to even a Schedule II, and allow, proper trials being conducted in an FDA environment for real results. that's where I get concerned, is why don't they want to know? The federal government should want to know how this product works, how these cannabinoids affect people's health, and maybe how that it improves their immune system. These things, I would think the federal government, in what I think should be their greater role of taking care of this population and all of those citizens that live underneath, the government's veil, should allow for someone to start testing this material and come back with anecdotal results that are FDA basically approved.
If people are interested in finding out more about your company, Lifestyle Delivery Systems, and participating in its benefits, where can they find out more?
Right now, I would say the best thing is the website. We're currently waiting for our certificate of occupancy, which will allow us to go into manufacturing. That probably won't happen till later this month. But as soon as that happens, then if they're a California resident and they go to a doctor and get a recommendation, they can certainly try them. They can try this solution. And certainly, depending on what their ailment is, I'm relatively certain that they'll get a positive reaction with their doctor's recommendation, and knowing that this is basically targeting an ailment that they are currently dealing with. Prior to that, it'll probably recreational use. I don't know that we're going to be a big product on the recreational market. I don't know that people are going to be looking at us for the we'll see. Unfortunately, it will affect the amount of material that's out there. So again, we need to control our supply chain.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about here, and it's eye-opening, it's thought-provoking, and it helps to dispel some potential misconceptions. Is there any additional sites or resources that you would recommend to people who want to just educate themselves about cannabinoids in general, their relative safety, their relative effectiveness?
Normal is a site in the U.S. that's been basically a pro-marijuana decriminalization advocate for some almost 40 years, I believe. I think if you go to the Normal site, you will find unbelievable amount of material to read if you're looking for more substance, more insight, what other doctors in other countries are saying, and what have you. I think it's an amazing resource, and again, it's a nonprofit entity. Their only purpose is to decriminalize what they think is an herb that's been demonized. So, if you're looking for more information that's not slanted one way or another, I think Normal is a good place to go, because there's certainly a lot of people purporting the benefits of marijuana, but some of them are a bit over the top, and there's certainly enough demonizing it, and they're pretty much undermining the good things that are there. So I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think Normal is a place to probably get a more balanced view of cannabis.
Well, Brad Eckenweiler, CEO of Lifestyle Delivery Systems, thanks once again so much for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers. I got to admit, this is a first-of-a-kind interview for us, but that in itself is not new. We've had first-of-a-kind interviews with, gold miners and all sorts of other folks. So just delighted to have you here and broadening the spectrum of topics that we're able to introduce for our viewers. And you've given them, we'll include a link to your site in the description so they can click there and find out more. And just thank you so much for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Dunnigan, thank you very much for taking the time to hear the story. I really appreciate it. So I look forward to hearing more questions.
Very good. Thank you, Brad.